This is Listening with Franklin Livingston, and our guest is Ethan Raysor.
So when we were on the break, a verse I'm going to read to you.
Yeah, go for it.
Philippians 2:7. So this is there are different translations, right? This is NIV, which says, rather, he's talking about Jesus Christ, right? Made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. So the term I learned a long time ago, kenosis, I guess. Let me see how to call it. Kenosis, which is the empathy. When you empty yourself, then there are translations that say emptied himself. Let me see actually which one is that. This is a version. It says that Philippians 2:7, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. So the God incarnate idea. The question is, how many people can make themselves aware of the people around themselves and understand their feelings, regardless of the person's condition, if they have any, right?
Right.
And I think what we were talking earlier, that I think our community is lacking that. People are becoming more careless. People are becoming more rude.
Yeah.
It seems to me there's less patience, less consideration on the roads, in the grocery stores. In general, we had a culture of holding the doors and all. A lot of that has been shifted.
Yeah. I think COVID had a huge impact on that. I noticed a big shift during COVID, especially with driving. I was living in Delaware at the time, so like I said, it's a pass-through state, meaning I had to use 95 to get to work most days or to get to school. So going back onto the roads after lockdown was lifted, I noticed erratic driving more. I'm not saying that it wasn't there before. It's always been something. Being anywhere near 95, there's almost always some kind of erratic behavior from people on the roads. But I noticed there was a very large amount, and I can't say that it's just because I was noticing it more or if it was truly larger. It just felt from that point on that there was a bigger lack of consideration for the people around you, especially driving in a car. Driving in a car is a very individualistic experience where it's, especially for the driver, it's just you and the road in front of you. For the passengers, you tend to be a little bit more concerned for the cars that are around you because you're not in control in that moment. But the person driving, full control and full focus should be ahead of you. But at the same time, you also have to be aware of your surroundings. And I think in general, a lot of people have become so individualistic from the pandemic happening that it's not just on the road that people aren't paying attention to their surroundings. It's, as you said, in line at the grocery store. It's in line at the bank. It's basically anytime there's a line ever, people don't care about the people around them. They just want to get to the front of the pack, out before everybody else, and back home to safety. But the truth is that even home is not really even safe anymore. Especially for people that don't look like everybody else or don't present themselves as everybody else. Home can be just as big of a safety hazard as being out in public all the time.
Yeah.
Especially living in a city. Like, for the first time, this has never happened to me before in New York, but for the first time, in between auditions a couple weeks ago, right before the holidays, I had the F word screamed at me from a cyclist. And the only thing I could see about him were his eyes. That's how quickly he went by me. But boy, did I hear um, the homophobic slur spewed at me. And so did everybody around me. And I was simply just walking on 42nd Street. It was raining that day. I had a red umbrella. I was wearing all black and my brown pea coat. And I didn't think that I was especially gay presenting in the moment. Like, I just thought that I was looking pretty business casual, and honestly, they should see what I wear on the weekends. But like,
they might not know. They, sometimes like people would just use some frequent words
Yeah.
that they are used to of, or that's in trend.
Yeah.
The reason I smiled was not on the story,
Right.
but I used to live on 42nd Street.
Oh,
between
really?
9 and 10. So I know how crazy that could be.
Yeah. And I was just really taken aback by that, because that's happened to me in Philly, that's happened to me in Wilmington plenty of times, but that was the first time I've ever come across like homophobia right at me
In the heart
quickly.
of New York City.
And yeah, and like, New York's supposed to be that place where everybody goes that they don't necessarily feel safe, but they feel accepted in some way. Like, it's a melting pot of so many cultures, so many people, that like you're able to kind of weave in and out of the city without necessarily drawing attention to yourself, unless you want attention drawn to you. And that was the first time I was not trying to draw attention to me, and I was picked out of a group of people and screamed at. And like, that just had never happened to me before in New York. And it just really stuck out to me, because I was like, this is a problem everywhere now. Like, if this is happening in New York, I can only imagine what that little gay boy is dealing with in like rural Tennessee. I can only imagine what they're dealing with in Atlanta. I can only imagine what it's like in Florida. Like, it's a problem everywhere, and it's becoming more and more noticeable. I don't know if it's because more people feel like it's acceptable now to spew hate, but I feel like there's just been a level of like bring the wall down, in a sense of, now I can show this part of my personality to people outside and I won't have any recourse for it. I can yell a slur at somebody and no one's going to yell at me for it. And it just took me back to when I was a kid again, and slurs weren't on the TV, but there were definitely negative connotations of people on the TV. And everybody liked to like use Family Guy and South Park as like bad representations of TV and people, but really they're poking fun at the people actually being terrible to people. And I think for the most part, a lot of conservative parents disliked those television shows because they were uncomfortable themselves with the mirror being reflected back at them.
Speaking of New York City, I think it seems to me everybody's mad at everybody. Like,
Yeah.
I got yelled at, but I remember one instance where it was early morning-ish, over a weekend, and a homeless type guy, I don't even know if he was homeless or he was drug addict, and he just came very close to me and then began yelling, "Go back to India." And I just laughed that I'm not from India. But then I was like, should I explain that to him?
Right.
And
Is he going to
doesn't
listen?
look like somebody in his senses, or who would even understand the geography
Right.
and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But it's very common. It's just like, I am here and don't get in my way.
Yeah.
The individualistic approach.
Yeah.
And I saw that before COVID. I think the
Yeah.
city had it.
Oh, for sure.
And the more wealthy buildings or places you get into, you see it more.
Yep.
And I was surprised to see that the term we use, like being polite or manner, or still saying hello and all that, or letting somebody enter an elevator. No, wasn't there.
Yeah.
And going back to the same um, thing we were talking about early, that way do people learn empathy? So the words I read, because you talked about God and Christianity, and you mentioned that it's not in the schools
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's not, but why can't parents teach children, people who follow Christianity or tradition, values, the term you used earlier, or Sunday schools? Now, I don't know, because I haven't been to Sunday schools and what kids are learning or how parents are parenting their children. I know when it comes to adults, that a lot of people love to teach, especially a particular kind of evangelical group. They love to teach, they love to learn, but I don't see them putting all that learning into practice.
Yeah. I think it's easy to take in information, but it's harder to assimilate it in a way that a child especially can understand, and children aren't born hating things. They're taught that. So in the same respect that they're taught to hate someone because of how they look or how they present themselves, they can also be taught to love it or simply ignore it. Like, why do they have to take something and make it about them at the end of the day? Like, this person looks this way and I don't like it. Why does it have to be about you? That person can look that way. It doesn't, like, your opinion of them ultimately does not matter. Whether you think they're weird looking or scary or anything like that, that does not actually matter at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's about who you are, and it's an uncomfortability with themselves that they're not being taught how to be comfortable with,
Exactly the same thing what I read from the Philippines, that the idea of God becoming human, we just celebrated Christmas.
Yep.
Right? And when God became so humble, that manger, the nativity, I saw that at a lot of public places. But how many of us take it to our heart
Right.
and live that out? That, okay, this is part of my belief system. This is what I believe in. This is the God I follow.
Yeah.
So I should be like him.
Yeah.
So when you were growing up, your parents were very committed Christians, right?
Yeah.
So
when it served them.
so what? Yeah. So talk to me about them, and then your upbringing and their influence, or their faith's influence on you guys.
Yeah. I think I don't like always attributing religion to control, but in some ways it can be used as a control mechanism. For my parents, they used faith as a control mechanism. They used it as a way to show right and wrong, to show moral, amoral, regardless of the gray areas that exist and whether or not those gray areas even do exist.
Give me a few examples to understand it better.
For example, my mom didn't believe in Darwinism.
Okay.
Which is a very controversial topic, I guess, still. Apparently just as controversial as the earth being flat, which I still don't understand how that's a topic, but it is to some people. She didn't believe in evolution. So I think she does now. I can't really be certain. But I didn't know about that until I was well into grade school, like 5th grade maybe was the first time that I was actually like taught what evolution is and the theory of evolution. So almost 10 years old. And that's the first time I'm ever hearing about where we actually come from instead of a faith-based creationism story. Um, that that was a huge curveball for me as a child because I was so convinced and so like brought up in creationism that I I didn't respect science or respect evolution or any of the things that come from evolution like biology and anatomy because I just didn't think that they were real. And I'm not saying that the entire church held that prospect. I'm not saying that there weren't people in our congregation that weren't scientists of some sort. Um, but the creationism being the only surefire way of humans existing in the first place was fundamentally what they were teaching. And they never at any point said, don't listen to evolution, don't listen to your school teachers or anything like that. But there was never any integration of any of those principles. You know, like that's what you learn at school. This is what you learn when you're here.
So
at
both
church.
these worlds are so disconnected.
Yes.
Right?
There's no Venn diagram where there's a center point. And as a kid, you want there to be a center point. You want there to be a mutual level of understanding because that's how we understand the world around us.
Because you get two messages.
Exactly.
Who is right and who is wrong, right?
Exactly.
I say, my mom says this and my teacher says this. So that adds conflict instead of
Yep.
having an awareness of both the worlds.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And because those worlds, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, those worlds were still so separated that was the dichotomy. You either believed in this or you believed in that, and became almost like identity politics, you know? And I think that's why people nowadays are so easy to fall into identity politic traps, because we were all taught to start those this or that kind of mentality at such a young age. And that was like part of the value that we were learning, you know?
So yeah, we I think we were talking before Connery rolled the camera about values. The way I believe sometimes values are misunderstood for being norms.
Yes.
And sometimes norms or rituals are understood as values.
Yep.
Right. So talk to me about this empathy. And how was that in your household and how it influenced your parents from their faith-based communities or
Yes.
teachings?
Because I talked about my mom in the last part, I'll talk a little bit more about my father and that side. Because he was Methodist, which they take things a little bit differently than Baptists do. My father and my stepmother, they didn't go into specifics on empathy ever. My stepmother was much more compassionate than my father is or was. I don't really have a good relationship with him, and that is by my own choice now because I don't feel like we're ever on the same page, so why keep trying to read two different books? But he like I said, he used religion as a controlling mechanism for us, and do unto others as you would have done unto yourself meant something different for him than it necessarily meant to the larger Christian community, you know, like that it was a kind of tit for tat, conditional love back and forth as opposed to unconditional love, you know, like the point of that saying is to unconditionally love your neighbor,
Right.
not conditionally love them. So if they don't do what you want, I'm not going to respect you as a person. Um, I don't mean to make it sound like he's a bad person by any means. I want to have empathy for him, and I do to a degree, but I also can't just ignore things that he obviously traumatized me and my siblings with. Um, so much so that like none of his kids are religious. None of us go to church anymore. None of us really identify with any specific secularized activity. Um, and a lot of that came from him sitting us down and in the morning listening to him preach Joel Olstein's books at us. And like, I don't know, maybe that wasn't the right way to engender compassion and understanding in your kids by having a very narrow-minded view of what those things meant. My stepmother was much better at uh kind of like fussing that out a bit and like getting us to think more critically about interactions that we had with not only our parents but our peers. But at the end of the day, she was still his wife, and being part of a traditional Christian household meant that she had to be subservient to him for one reason or another. And I think that's part of what is wrong with a lot of traditional Christian values is that it's always about obeying and laying down everything for a greater good that you don't even know is good. You're just being told it's good. And that's not the same as knowing, like you can't just be told one way and that's the only way things could ever be when there are millions, billions of other possibilities out there. And to expect your children, especially, to never want to reach for those possibilities is inane, to say the least.
Talk to me about this greater good you're talking about.
So greater good, I think it means something different for each person, first off. But secondly, for me, what it means or meant in that space was pleasing my parents and pleasing them and their desires for who I was supposed to be or who my siblings are supposed to be. So I took it as a very literal, like, you have to do this way kind of thing. And you have to be this kind of person and you have to try this hard at school. And there were many times that even though it had nothing to do with our religion, my father was consistently pushing me to be straight A only student. And if I did anything less, then I would be punished for it. And growing up that way, I didn't understand that a greater good is different for everyone. And that good is a very subjective term put to a objective lens. And I think it's hard for kids especially to understand those nuances and be able to suss out what is ultimately the good here. Like, am I supposed to be happy with myself, or am I supposed to be happy with how happy my dad is of me, how much I please him in the way that I have grown up as a person, And I think that was one of the biggest obstacles I had to overcome as an adult is I have to be happy with my life. I have to be happy with the person I am. Regardless if I'm pleasing my parents, I have to be, at the end of the day, I'm going to be the last person left with me. So am I going to like that person, or am I going to hate everything that I did just for somebody else? Just so that I could feel 1 ounce of unconditional love, which was still conditional love. But when you're in it, it feels like everything's unconditional love. You just have to be better. you know? And I hate that there's still kids out there that feel that way. And I hate that that is such a rampant part of teaching children still, that like being a good whatever, whether it's a good student, being a good kid, being a good sibling, is the way that we're propelling kids into their futures. Because what happens when they have to decide what is good? Do they actually know? Or were they just told this is what's good? And that may not actually be good. You know, like someone could think that genocide is a good thing and that's what should be happening. So they're teaching their kids that that is an okay thing to do. What happens when that kid grows up and learns that genocide is not a good thing? What are the other mental struggles that they're going to have, because now their entire worldview has changed just based off of one aspect,
Right.
you know? And I think that's something that my dad really struggled with as a parent, is allowing his children to understand good on their own instead of good to please him.
You talking about your father and his expectations,
Yes.
which were, if I understood correctly, not fair to you.
Yeah.
Annoying, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna read a verse that came to your mind, to my mind. And I'm assuming if your father was a church-going person, so his standard of goodness or his behavior should have been rooted in the scripture,
Yes.
right? I don't know if he read this or not. I'm gonna read Colossians 3:21. And it warns fathers, do not embitter your children. And that's the NIV, New International Version. Or do not provoke your children. That's the English Standard Version. Do not exasperate your children. That's the Holman version. Right? So this verse stops parents from doing something that doesn't settle well inside their children.
Right.
Right. And going back to the idea of empathy, if a parent has been empathetic to the children, to the kids, the results might have been better.
Absolutely.
Because throughout their life, they will struggle with that hurt. Or because they would see it as a hurt. They would see it, my parents were not considerate of my needs or my wants or my desires. And you mentioned about taking a book and reading it to you guys. I don't know if it was reading to you guys, did not engage in conversation. So
there was no conversation.
No understanding. Yeah. So I don't know if that was a healthy thing to do, right? So
yeah.
So if that's going back to the same idea of what you were saying, that having a standard set by a religion, or like it used to be in the schools, like God and the Bible, gives something to look up to, that this is, or something to get influenced by or inspiration from.
Right? Yes.
That this
100%.
is what we should be living out, or this is the manner we should behave in, or these are the values we should live by.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate that a lot of people would maybe read and don't understand, or they don't read it carefully, or they would just listen it and then they would want to have their own will forced on their children, on their spouse, on their friends. And then this keeps on going. We see that that happens then, that this is my will and I want my community to be like this. This is my will and I want the whole country to be like this.
Yep.
Or I don't care that if someone has a different belief system or a cultural values, this is what I want.
Yep.
And when somebody identifies with a particular religion, I think this is also another danger, and we see that happening around us. you see your father as a Christian who belonged to Methodist denomination, the tradition. Now, in your mind, you're a very smart person, but say if you were just viewing him as a Christian man torturing his kid. So his affiliation with that religion or denomination also gets a bad repute.
Absolutely.
And which happens around the world when it comes to a lot of people don't like church. They don't like religion at all. And it's not about Christianity, other religions too. They
Yeah.
say, oh, I don't like Islam, I don't like Muslims
Yep.
because of certain things. Right?
Yes.
And I
Absolutely.
think that's bad. People should be careful that the religion they identify with, are they really living that religion principles out in their life, or they just making up their own stuff, and that's the goodness or
Yep.
the standard or the benchmark they are giving to others, that this is what I want you to do.
100%. I couldn't say it better myself, honestly, because that at the end of the day, the will is where it comes from. And taking away someone else's free will and telling them your will is the better will is the problem here. You know, we're not
My way or the highway.
exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I started choosing my way over his way, I was met with a lot of backlash from him. I was met with a lot of, okay, well, I'm not doing this for you anymore, aka supporting my mom with child support money. Yeah, which the last 2 years that he was supposed to pay for me, he just stopped altogether, because I wasn't living the way he wanted me to live. And when I stopped going to school and he had helped me uh, buy a car through his company, he decided this was his turn at retribution because I decided to stop going to college because I was working full time, essentially at 3 different part time jobs, um, teaching ballet and a restaurant. That he was going to refinance my car because he was the finance uh, manager at
Okay.
the Lexus branch. And he took off all of the money that he had put down on the car. And when I thought that I made my last payment on it, he said, you should check that website again. So I refreshed the portal, and the money he had put down was suddenly back onto the car's balance, and I had close to 10 more grand to pay off after paying 2 grand of it myself.
Wow.
And for reference, I was making $125 a week at my ballet company. I was making maybe $300 a week at the restaurant I was working at, and probably about $150 at the teaching gig that I had. And because I chose to pursue my art and the thing that I was most passionate about, that if I took that out of my life, life wouldn't be worth living for me, he decided that that was a fair retribution. Although he never paid for any of my school. He never paid for any of my tuition. He rented my books once for me for 1 semester and got me a laptop that when it was stolen out of my car in the city of Wilmington, which is not very hard to do, he was like, oh, well, there goes your laptop. So all of a sudden I had to start using the school computers again, which was also not very conducive to my schedule, because now I had to somehow fit going to the school public library. Well, public is generous because obviously it's through a university, but I had to find time in my already packed schedule from 8 a.m. until midnight most nights when I was working at the restaurant to now put in time to actually be able to do my schoolwork and my essays and my exam papers. And somehow he thought all of that was justified because I stopped I stopped doing the thing that he bargained with me for.
Which was?
He'd pay for my car if I continue going to school. So he unpaid for my car and put me $8,000 into debt at
Without telling you?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Ripe age of 19 years old.
So you took it as my father did, or you also had something in mind that, look at this guy. He calls himself, claims to be a Christian. He goes to a Methodist church and he's so committed there. And then he did this, which hurts more.
I looked at it as a mixture of both, because one thing I knew about him is that he was using the religion as a cover up. Like he was using it to make himself look better from the outside. That's just who he is as a person. He's not truly Christian by any means, but he was using it as a way to look better in society and be the church going man that goes to church on Sundays with all 5 of his kids and his lovely wife and living the white American dream. So part of it was, I can't believe he did that as being a Christian, but also, like, that is my father. Like, he's not supposed to do these things to his kids. And yet I wasn't the last kid he did that to. He did that to my middle sister. I have 3 sisters. The middle one, he did the exact same thing to. And when she confronted him about it, he basically had the same thing to say back to her. And it's like, okay, so this is now like 2 kids out of 5 that you're treating the exact same way. Meanwhile, 2 of your other children get whatever they want whenever they want it. All they have to do is obey you. And because they do, they get it. And it's really hard to sit back and like go through all of that myself, but then also have to watch my younger siblings go through it too. Because I know that the ones that sit back and do what he wants, they're not happy. Like, they're not happy with themselves. And I don't want them to be unhappy as they get older and think back on all of this time that they spent just pleasing somebody else. But I also know that the ones like me who stand against them, they end up having to go through a lot more hardship just because they wanted to be their own person and not have to live under somebody's thumb.
Wow, a lot to process. Yeah.
Yeah. My life has been long.
Yeah, I bet it has. Yeah, I think these principles or standards or laws, who sets them, right?
Right.
And this rigidity of laws. I was thinking of Jesus challenging Pharisees, because in that world, these Pharisees had set standards about everything. Like, hey, you don't wash hands, or you don't pick some edibles from the field on the Sabbath day, right? And earlier you talked about gray area. I think one of the things which gets eliminated in a way from many of the Christian churches and households is this gray area. And I think that the leader of our tradition, Jesus Christ, was always in gray area.
Yeah.
He was challenging these Pharisees over their rules and over their standards. Who's pious, who's going to get to the kingdom of heaven, and what should be done on what day. No, it's so black and white.
Yeah.
Right. And there are tons of scriptures. Maybe we read them, but again, do we take those to our hearts, and do we really understand what's happening in them or not?
Right. And where are they going at the end of the day? Like, are we just reading them at face value, or are we, as you said, like taking them into your heart and assimilating them into your day-to-day life? And I understand that's a large part of why churches have multiple days a week, so that you can start going to church not only on Sundays but also on Wednesdays for like adult church, and Mondays or Thursdays for men's church or women's church, something like that. But at the end of the day, if you're getting the same kind of result from all of those things, just going extra days a week isn't helping you
No,
put it
because I
into
think
practice. You
I'll
know?
give you my example, just recent example. I went to a church and they had a men's group, and I did not have a lot of things going on. So I thought I should go there and I should meet new people,
Yeah.
develop connections. I went there. Very passionate guy was leading the Bible study.
They always
And
are.
he had printed
Mhm.
things and all, and question answers, and very passionate. And I was told that he doesn't like latecomers, although I was like, because I was finding the place. I texted the guy, assuming that, okay, now we are becoming part of the community, get to know, we'll hang out, we'll go out for coffee. And first time, kind of like he was busy. And second, he and I we did meet briefly. And after that, I wanted to continue that conversation or connection,
Mm-hmm.
but no. And I was surprised. And then I stopped because I was feeling more awkward. That why am I don't know what he's thinking, why
Right.
I am texting him more than I should. So that's the disconnect I have experienced here in the United States too. This was not in the US. A lot of these churches, that's what I'm calling them, more like evangelical type churches that believe in this bam, salvation, you saved,
Yeah.
and that done deal. They
Speaking in
want to
tongues.
teach you a lot of things, but they don't live that out, in my opinion. And
Oh,
unless the
for sure.
leader is not living those things out, if you think, oh God, my leader who wants me to be a part of a vibrant community and serve and give and do a lot of stuff, but I don't see him or her doing that stuff, mostly him because they're straight males.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't want to do it because I don't get inspo, right?
Yeah.
And what's my inspiration?
Yeah.
I got the theory, but if you're not doing it, why should I do it?
Yeah.
And I think that's not a great place to be in. And then you
Yeah.
lose interest. Like, why should I go to a church? If I want to go there and listen to something for 20 minutes, I can do that on YouTube. And same thing with mega churches or these high profile Christians.
Yeah.
A lot of them around here, you go to a church and people are so arrogant. No one's going to smile at you. And first
Yeah.
of all, they're going to look at me that, why are you here? What are you doing here? So,
Trust and believe. I
so
walk
why
in
should
wearing
I
a
go
pink
there?
shirt and people are like,
yeah,
why are you here? You know?
exactly. So why should I go there? I don't want to go there. And then eventually what happens is that I struggle, or people like me would struggle. What's my identity? Okay, I believe in Christ. I believe in the scripture. But am I Christian or not?
Right.
Am I a believer or not? Because I don't belong to a group of people.
Right.
And in some countries, when you travel to, it's very important to have a religious identification.
Yes.
Because they don't know. You can't say, oh, I'm agnostic, because then you'll stand there like you talk to the guy or whoever gave you those passes.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to explain that what that means, and they
Yeah.
might say, we don't have a box for you.
Right.
Either like you are a Muslim, you are a Jew, you are a Hindu, you are a Jain, you're a Christian.
Yeah.
So personal belief system is great, but again, I don't think many religions, including Christianity, was meant to be just a personal stuff. I don't know how it became more individualistic in the United States, to the point that I see a disconnect between the communal life, the way it's lived out by Christians, and especially those who call themselves Bible-based Christians
Yeah.
or evangelicals, that we are the true followers of the gospel, this heavy-duty vocabulary, right? And
100%.
it's sad, but it's true.
Yeah.
That's the truth. I think we are missing out, and just living in some our own truths,
Yeah.
like maybe your father had. That this
Yeah.
is the way my children should be,
Yeah.
and if you're not doing that, right, you're wrong, or you just doomed. Whatever, I
Right.
don't know what he had in his mind, but I see some similarities in a household upbringing and an upbringing in a community of faith.
Yeah. And I think I think they play off of one another for the most part, especially households that are very faith based. They take those lessons and those community norms back home, and that's how they help judge and teach their kids whether or not something is good or bad, especially for a kid. You really just want to know if something's good or bad. You really want to know if it's a scary monster or if it's a beautiful fairy, like those are the things that you're looking for. You're looking for the black, white, and everything in between and what it all means. And I think that's really hard for any parent to have to codify, which is why they use religion and faith based communities as a means to do so. However, we're not looking at the hypocrisy and the paradox of those places and teaching our kids about that as well. It took me being outside of Christian religion to understand a lot of the paradox and hypocrisy that happens. I was told it when I was growing up in it, but they were all outsiders and they were all not saved. And when this rapture happens, I'm going up to heaven and they're staying here on earth. Honestly, if it happens and I end up having to stay here on earth because of being knowledgeable of other people and how they view life and view living with the earth, then so be it. At least I'll get to keep living out life instead of just having to dead stop and go up to heaven. Like I understand why they have to other people, but I don't think that it's helpful, especially when you're teaching children, because they're going to always have to understand what an other is. And if you don't communicate effectively how to process those things, then kids like me, we're not going to have a chance and we're going to have to learn it on our own. But then the kids that aren't like me, that do take you for your word without questioning or wanting to have a why or a how, they're going to grow up and live the same kind of lives that you've lived, and I understand that's what a lot of parents want, but like that's not necessarily what the world needs. The world needs people that are compassionate for one another, that are trying to make the world a better place, not people that are just trying to keep individualist capitalist society running. And when you said you're not sure how the individualism comes into religion here in the States, I think it honestly has a lot to do with capitalism, because capitalism is the ultimate individualist endeavor. And had we not been so embracing of capitalism, perhaps individualism wouldn't have been so codified into everything else, including religion.
Yeah, but I think again, like there should be awareness.
Yeah.
That okay,
Oh,
this is
absolutely.
our economic system, but this is what my belief system is based on the scriptures, based on the tradition I grew up in or I follow, right?
Yeah.
But having no knowledge is a dangerous thing. What
Absolutely.
you already said, and a lot of times I see people learning about God, religions, even Christianity or Jesus, when they have left the church. They have learned about it better or more clearly after leaving the church from the other channels,
Mm-hmm.
which is really sad to me.
Yeah,
Because then
100%.
why do we have these institutions?
Right.
You know,
And
aren't
why?
they supposed to
Yeah.
teach that stuff?
And why don't they pay taxes if they're not even doing what they're supposed to be
They
doing?
don't.
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's 513C non-for-profit.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep. And that's why some of these mega churches can even exist at the capacity that they do, because they don't have to pay taxes on it. Yeah, I know. Which is, again, like, what's the real cause of evil here? Is it is it the money, or is it the way that people are using the money and abusing the power that comes with it, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd love to be able to, like, give one straight answer that, like, just nails it on the head, but honestly, I think it's very complex, and there's multiple problems that all come back down to survival, and survival of what we consider the fittest, you know, which is ironic because religious households don't tend to accept Darwinism. Meanwhile, they're actively participating in it. They're actively participating in survival of the fittest. And that is one of the main principles of Darwinism.
Okay, I did not know that.
Yep.
My thing is, okay, again, going back to the same idea, if somebody believes in a different belief system than you, how to listen to them, right?
Yeah.
And how to set an example by living out your truth so the others see it and love you.
Mm-hmm.
And you exchange love unconditionally, right? But instead of that, when we run into this comparison or who is right and wrong, it's not going to get us anywhere.
Right.
Or just holding on to something and saying, this is my truth, and I don't care whatever you have going on, right? And that doesn't leave a room for any conversation, any connection or relation outside your own group.
Yep.
And that ends up becoming cult.
Yep.
And then it also adds a lot of other emotions. You develop hate, anger, rejection toward others,
Shame.
yeah. And then the others retaliate. So how do we end up having this massive tension in the world starting from just one thing?
I think it comes down to how we listen to one another. A lot of people listen to respond, they're not listening to understand. And I think if we were able to do more listening to understand, we'd be able to understand a lot more instead of just listening to get the next thing out, you know? And being someone that has ADHD and struggles with interrupting others, you'd think that that would be a very big problem for me, but I've learned how to try to keep my thought as well as I can so that I can have a conversation with someone and I'm not dominating it. You know, that's one of the big problems that ADHD gets a bad rep for, besides the whole getting up and running around thing, which is neither here nor there. But the interrupting part and the disrupting part, I think if people like me are able to figure out ways to still have a conversation and still learn and understand people, then there's no reason why people that aren't like me can't do that too. You know,
Very
like it comes down to whether or not you're accepting of the other person sitting across from you, not whether or not you're able to listen to them. Because I have to focus more to listen to you, but I'm still listening to you. I'm still taking in what you're saying and forming a response based off of what you're saying, not forming my response and then yelling it at you, you know? And I think that's where a lot of our identity politics and identity crisis issues stem from, is the fact that we're not actually listening to one another. We're just saying things and hoping to be heard.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's why a lot of people look at civil rights and gay rights as being such a, well, why is there no straight rights? Why is there no white rights and stuff like that? You already have them. You inherently have them already. And just because we're actively saying we need rights doesn't take away from yours. We're just saying we need to have as many as you do because we are human too. We live, we love, we laugh just like you. We're just different from you, you know? And I think that's where the struggle to find equal rights and equitable rights in this country is at its greatest disadvantage, because a lot of people of color and a lot of LGBTQ people are constantly yelling from tops of mountains what's wrong. And people are taking the, oh, well, they're just being loud. Oh, they're just being obnoxious. Oh, they're just being prideful. And that's a sin. So there's another reason why we shouldn't like them, you know? And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's a fair representation. When someone is actively saying, help, I'm in crisis, that doesn't mean, oh, well, how bad of a crisis is it? And are you saying it in a way that I want to listen to it in? You know?